Welcome to the Sharkpreneur podcast with Kevin Harrington and Seth Greene. Kevin Harrington is the inventor of the infomercial, one of the original sharks from the hit TV show Shark Tank, and has generated over $5 billion in TV and digital direct response sales. Seth Greene is the world's first trusted authority on cutting-edge direct response marketing, a best-selling author, and the only 3-time Marketer of the Year nominee. On the podcast, Kevin and Seth interview sharkpreneurs who share straight talk on what it takes to explode your business.
49 faces looked to him in triumph. Over the last 12 months, they had each taken turns and promoted his business for a week at a time, driving over $987,342 in revenue. What if you had a network of 50 centers of influence who promoted your business every week for a year? Grab your copy of the #1 Amazon best-selling book, The Ultimate Guide to Growing Your Business with a Podcast, at 33% off the Amazon price by going to ultimatepodcastbook.com. Again, that website for 33% off the Amazon price is ultimatepodcastbook.com. Welcome to the podcast. This is your host, Seth Greene. Today I have the good fortune to be with Jay Aldebert from Return to Owner, a system that helps business owners understand how much profit their company actually needs to succeed. He works with privately held businesses to uncover hidden issues like low margins, pricing problems, and cash flow gaps that normal financial reports often miss. He's got over 25 years of experience and exposure to more than 86,000 businesses. Jay helps business owners make clearer, smarter decisions by showing them what needs to change to build a stronger, more profitable company, something we all want. Jay, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Seth. I'm glad to be here.
We're glad to have you. Let's go back in time. 86,000 businesses. How did you get started?
It was a newspaper in the face, actually. It was where I got started. I saw an article. It said, can you sell the CEO? And I decided I'll give it a try. Turns out it was a sales position. I didn't like that, but there was an analyst position introduced along the way. And that's how I got hired on by the firm. It's called International Services. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say that, but International Services Inc. And the rest has been history.
Well, I'm sure there's a longer version of that story that's probably
very much so.
a book somewhere. Was there a moment early on when you realized most business owners misunderstand profit?
Yeah, it was, I was 25 years old and I'm going into these companies who've owned them for 25 years, essentially. And I noticed that even the small amount of training I had at that point, the conversation seemed to gear heavily towards accounting, where we look at it from a finance standpoint. And I could see that they they looked at profit as an afterthought in general.
What in your mind, what's the difference between accounting and finance?
There's a huge difference. Right now, I can walk into any company, let's say $3 million electrical contractor, and it says they made $150,000 last year. Well, that's pretty good. It's a 5% net profit. And the client could say, or their accountant would say, in most cases, you had a good year. You did pretty good. You know, it was not great, but it was pretty good. But I can go in and look at that company and very specifically look at their debt service, working capital, and retirement, 3 basics right there that actually would indicate that that company probably had to make $250,000, whether they wanted to or not. In other words, the requirement of that business to service its debt and to fund its, let's say, deficit in working capital, it needed to be $250,000. And that's the biggest difference from 2 different sides.
So what exactly is Return to Owner? And you alluded to it. I'd like to go get more detailed on how it's different from traditional profit metrics.
Okay, so 86,000 businesses, just to give you an idea of how that came about. I was an analyst going one-on-one with clients, maybe 125 a year for the first 6 years of my career. And then I got promoted, and I have 35 analysts, and they're going to roughly 35 to 3,800 companies a year. And I get to see 4 years of financials, and I get to see, that group is going to 3,800. I get to see 4 years of financials. I get to see operationals, all that kind of stuff. And it all flows through my desk. And I started seeing the very same things over and over again. This company's, very happy about the profit they made. They're looking at what can they spend money on in terms to lower their taxes. And if they do, it's going to kill their company, and they're not recognizing it. So after seeing that much exposure, or having that much exposure to all the financials, I started seeing things over and over and over again that weren't cataloged in management accounting or regular accounting. It was specifically looking at how a company, more specifically, I guess, RTO, what it does is when I walk into any business tomorrow, I can tell you every performance indicator it has to hit to bring it to a state of health. In most cases, all the choices that have led up to that point put them in an ailing position, I guess is the best way to put it. And it pinpoints them and actually dictates what the company has to do to get out of the position they're in.
Why do you think so many of us as business owners rely on financial reports that aren't telling, in your words, the full story?
I think it's been indoctrinated. Like essentially, you become a business owner because you like something, a trade, and you start selling. And then somebody comes along and says, "Hey, you got to report to the government." And you go, "Okay, what does that mean?" "Well, you got to get an accountant. You got to do tax returns." "Okay, fine." And that becomes your only source of truth. Whether you look at it or not, you now have these, okay, well, my first year, I just handed a shoebox to the accountant. He says, "Don't do that anymore. I'm going to throw you on some sort of software, some accounting software." So you do this accounting software and you start saying, "Well, I guess I can see how well I did this month," right? And you look at the top number, which is the revenue. You look at the bottom number. You usually don't look at anything in between. And then what ends up happening is that lagging indicator, which is usually a month old from the end of that month, you kind of go, "Well, that tells me the story. Let's see what I can change and see if that affects the business." That in itself is such a lagging indicator. And that's why people get hooked on accounting.
If someone listening to this or watching this says, I'm profitable, I'm fine, what would you challenge them to look at?
I would say very specifically two things. One, calculate your debt service. Not a lot of people understand that every time they look at their profit and loss statement, it does not have debt service in there. So I made $10,000 last month, but debt service is not recorded. Usually people don't record the interest to the end of the year. And if I have a $15,000 monthly payment to debt, I think I actually did good. But I actually have $5,000 upside down. And this comes up to the second part, working capital, the calculation of working capital. There's a calculation for working capital required of a business. There's a calculation for working capital actual. If the delta of that is in a deficit, then I just damage my company by missing it by $5,000. If I have a surplus, well, I might be able to last. But the problem is nothing of this is measured in any accounting software. And those two things will tell you a lot about the health of a company very quickly.
How can a owner tell if they've got a pricing problem?
So the pricing problem, it's going to be interesting to say. I don't think clients have, or I don't state a client has a pricing problem until I actually look at how they manage their direct costs, right? So all of us business owners, we buy material, we add margin, we sell it. We buy labor, we add margin, we sell it. We buy subcontractors, we add margin, we sell it. Whatever pricing model they've come up in the first place most likely meets what their market will bear. Okay. So raising their prices or saying that they have a problem could be a difficulty. What I want to see is what they retain of that pricing model. When you ask a client, and not being disparaging to them, but if I ask them, how much gross margin did you build into that? Actually build into it in percentage or dollars, they can't tell me. They'll guess at whatever the accounting said, but that's after they mismanage material in terms of waste, theft, or damage. Labor productivity. Do you know what labor productivity in this nation is right now? It's about 62%. And that means trades, I'm talking manufacturing. For every 40 hours they're paying, they get about 26 hours of thorough put back. That's the average. I know it's hard to believe, and a lot of people say, no way that anybody gets that because they think I'm, attacking their leadership, but that's actually a measured truth. So I would rather look at those elements of how they control them and how much they can be moved within their pricing model before I get to ever saying, let's add 5%.
Why do you think cash flow is often a bigger issue than profit?
Cash flow is really the whole stating. I love the saying, it's robbing Peter to pay Paul, right? It doesn't matter if I'm profitable. We talked about working capital for a second. If you're in a deficit, the company never accumulates cash, ever. It just never will. If you have a deficit, that's what's going to happen. So cash flow means I may not have the profit and I may not have the cash sitting there, but if I can pull some receivables in real quick that were probably earmarked for something else and pay for the thing that's, really bothering me at this particular point, then I think absolutely that cash flow is where I'm going to lean because it always seems to fix my problem, even if I'm creating a bigger deficit over here.
How does understanding return to owner, the philosophy, kind of change the way somebody makes decisions?
When I show any owner, business owner, and just so we're clear, it was launched in 2024, so it probably has close to 10,000 reps at this point now in terms of at bats. When you show a client this, like they can't unsee it. It's so astonishing. It goes five main areas. It comes up with their minimum mandatory profit. In other words, every decision they've made up till that point has determined what their company has to make in profit. It then figures out a return on investment budget on their fixed cost capacity. In other words, their fixed costs. It really measures their intended gross margin based on their pricing model. And with all of that information, short and sweet, it actually establishes the break-even sales volume. So any question I've led up to that point, like how much do you want to do in sales this year? How much do you want to do in profit? It actually doesn't matter because the business tells us what the minimum floor is. And that's what RTO does.
What are some of the biggest mistakes you see business owners making?
My favorite is we just passed tax time. Their accountant says, go buy something. Go buy something. That's one of the most irritating ones. It pisses me off, excuse my language. Because we go in there and now they have the debt service that, based on that piece of equipment in most cases. Or if they paid cash, hypothetically, they paid cash, nobody paid attention to the working capital side of things. So those are some of the biggest mistakes that now the client's going to pay for a long period of time for such a short term. You save what? Your marginal tax rate based on the thing you buy. That's what you've reduced it by. But now you have damaged, in most cases, your company. That's the biggest mistake I see.
Who benefits the most from your system? Are there specific industries or business sizes that it works better for?
No, not really. Actually, we kind of play in the 1 million to 100 million range, and we touch every industry. I would say it would work for, but we don't, is like medical offices or dental offices. But it's kind of the same thing. I hate to look at them like manufacturing plants because there's a personal service there, but that's kind of what they are. But I think it touches every trade.
What types of professionals are ideal partners or referral sources for you?
In terms of the use of the RTO or in
Like, are
terms
we,
of
is this
businesses?
financial advisors? Is it accountants? Is this attorneys?
It would seem that we don't really have a good working relationship. And what I mean by that is the accountant is territorial, right? They're the ones that are asked every question, even if it's not their education, and they want to maintain their client. When they hear that I'm in there or one of my analysts or whatever it is, nosing around and looking at the financials, they get very territorial. So, and a lot of times, until they understand where we sit, and we're not trying to replace them, and it very rarely do we get referrals from that standpoint. Usually after, but not before. It's ego slash territory related.
You've been obviously doing really well. How do you get the word out about what you're doing?
Funny thing is, you would our marketing is archaic. Archaic. When I say archaic, we still have call centers, and we produce 3,000 leads a week, 300 sales. We run, as I said, numerous analysis a week, and so on and so forth. We've just, as of late, started marketing, and the marketing. I am our, let's say, our ambassador, or I don't want to say influencer. I don't like that word. And so anything to do with, right now I'm doing contributing content out to the internet for business owners to look at. And if they feel like continuing that conversation, it's definitely available there.
If a business owner remembers just one number or one concept from today, what should it be?
I know it's redundant and boring, but it's such an epidemic. Debt service. Calculate your debt service. Put all your payments together for a month, add them all up. That's what you got to cover this year, but then add taxes on top of that because you got to make that. So add another 35%. And then boil it down to a month. Essentially, stare at that number and know if you don't make that number, it's a score of the game, right? If you're a sports fan, it's a score you've got to beat just to be and you got to have wins, enough wins to get in the playoffs. For a business owner, it's pretty much 11 wins out of 12.
Your passion is obvious. What do you like best about what you're doing?
Uh, the honestly, it's how you change people's lives. You're sitting across from an individual that started a business, and they have to develop this strong ego to lead people, right? Lead their clients, lead their people, lead the vendors in the marketplace, all those different things. And so it really doesn't allow them to reach out and say, "I need help in some way." In most cases. So the ability to sit across from another individual, bring that wall down, however technique you have to do, and then show them, and then be able to show after the fact, once you get to that pivotal moment and we do our project, we actually changed their lives, not just for their life, but there's probably 30 people you touch. If they have 10 employees and they have families and so on and so forth, the impact of how I am with that client has such a large spectrum of people it touches.
That is a beautiful ripple effect.
Yes, absolutely.
For our folks who are watching or listening and want to learn more, where is the best place for them to go to learn more about you and Return to Owner?
I would say the best place right now would be on YouTube under Jay Aldebert, Jayaldebert. That's the best place to start right now.
We will send everybody to your YouTube channel. We greatly appreciate your time. We know it's incredibly valuable. This has been Seth Greene with Jay Aldebert from Return to Owner. Jay, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks you again, Seth.
Thank you, everyone, for watching or listening. We will talk to you or see you next time.
Why do so many businesses struggle while others seem to explode overnight? Do you wish you had the secret to this type of exponential growth? Now, I've scaled more than 20 businesses to over $100 million, and it's not just luck. In my new book with Mark Tim, Mentor to Millions, you'll learn the repeatable framework I use in all my business ventures for massive success. Order at kevinmentor.com and get over $1,000 in bonuses. Head to kevinmentor.com.